Cognitive reframing. You're standing at the edge of a familiar argument with someone you care about, feeling that familiar surge of frustration rising in your chest. The words they just spoke seem so unreasonable, so clearly wrong, that your mind immediately begins constructing the perfect response to prove your point. But then something strange happens, a tiny shift in perspective, like adjusting the focus on a camera lens, and suddenly you see their words differently. What if the very thoughts that feel most solid, most obviously true, are actually the most flexible things you possess? Here lies one of the most liberating paradoxes of human consciousness. The thoughts that feel most real and unchangeable are often the ones most ready to transform. Cognitive reframing suggests that our interpretations of events, not the events themselves, create our emotional reality. Yet this seems impossible when you're in the grip of a powerful thought or feeling that appears to be an undeniable truth about the world. On one hand, your thoughts about what's happening feel like direct reports from reality itself. When someone cuts you off in traffic, the thought they're being inconsiderate doesn't feel like an interpretation, it feels like an obvious fact. When you don't receive a text back quickly, the worry that maybe they're upset with me seems like reasonable concern based on evidence. These thoughts arrive with such immediacy and conviction that questioning them feels almost absurd. On the other hand, the Stoics understood something profound about the nature of these mental events. They recognized that between any external circumstance and your emotional response lies a space, a moment of interpretation where you unconsciously choose how to frame what's happening. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this gap constantly, reminding himself that you have power over your mind, not outside events. This isn't about positive thinking or denial. It's about recognizing that your initial interpretation might not be the only valid one. Consider how differently you might experience the same delayed text message depending on your mental frame. Through one lens, it becomes evidence of rejection or conflict. Through another, it might simply mean the other person is busy, or their phone died, or they want to craft a thoughtful response. The external fact, the absence of an immediate reply, remains identical. Only the story you tell about it changes. And yet this shift in story can completely transform your emotional state. The ancient Stoics practiced this reframing as a daily discipline, not because they wanted to become emotionally numb, but because they recognized how much unnecessary suffering comes from treating their first interpretation as gospel truth. Epictetus taught his students to catch themselves in the moment between perception and reaction, asking, "Is this the only way to see what just happened?" This question doesn't invalidate your initial response. It simply opens space for other possibilities to breathe. What makes this practice so powerful is how it reveals the creative nature of your everyday thinking. You're constantly writing stories about what events mean, what other people's behaviors indicate, and what your experiences say about you or your future. Most of the time, this storytelling happens so automatically that you don't notice you're doing it. Cognitive reframing makes this usually invisible process conscious and deliberate. Think about how you interpret your own mistakes or failures. One frame might cast them as evidence of your inadequacy, proof that you don't have what it takes to succeed. Another frame might see them as information, as natural parts of learning, as signs that you're taking risks and growing. The facts of what happened don't change. You still made the error, still didn't get the outcome you wanted. But the meaning you assign to those facts creates entirely different emotional experiences and future possibilities. This isn't about forcing yourself to see everything positively or pretending that genuine problems don't exist. Some situations truly are difficult, some losses genuinely painful, some challenges legitimately overwhelming. The Stoic approach to reframing isn't about denial, it's about distinguishing between the inherent difficulty of a situation and the additional suffering you might be adding through harsh or hopeless interpretations. When you lose a job, for instance, the practical challenges are real. Financial worry, the need to search for new work, the disruption to your routine and identity. But layered on top of these genuine difficulties might be stories about what the loss means, that you're a failure, that good opportunities never come your way, that your career is over. Cognitive reframing helps you separate the actual problems you need to solve from the additional burden of these interpretative stories. The deepest Stoic insight about reframing is that it reveals how much agency you actually have in your emotional life. So much of the time, feelings seem to happen to you, anger arises, sadness descends, anxiety grips you. But when you begin to notice the thoughts and interpretations that feed these emotions, you discover points of choice you never knew existed. You realize that between the trigger and your response lies a space where wisdom can operate. This space isn't always easy to access. When you're in the middle of strong emotions, when threats feel immediate, when old patterns of thinking have deep grooves in your mind, reframing can feel impossible. But like any skill, it grows stronger with gentle practice. You begin by noticing your interpretations after the fact, simply becoming aware of the stories you told yourself. Then, gradually, you might catch yourself in the middle of a familiar mental pattern. Eventually, you might even pause before reacting, asking yourself what other ways there might be to understand what's happening. The wonder of cognitive reframing is how it transforms your relationship with your own thinking. Instead of being at the mercy of whatever interpretation first arises, you become curious about the range of possible meanings any event might hold. You develop what the Stoics called the view from above, the ability to step back and see your thoughts as one perspective among many, rather than as the single, unquestionable truth about reality. This shift brings a profound kind of freedom, not the freedom to control external events that remains largely beyond your influence, but the freedom to choose how you relate to whatever happens. It's the recognition that while you can't always control what occurs in your life, you retain significant power over what it means to you. And sometimes, that shift in meaning changes everything else.